Hello and welcome. My name is Rachel Carter and I'm going to be the moderator of this mystery and thriller panel. I'm a young adult novelist who admittedly is very afraid of mystery, thriller, and horror, but I'm very excited to hear what our writers have to say today and, to pick their brains a little bit. So I'm going to introduce each of them, kind of going down the line here, and then we're going to play a little game with the audience. We want to do two truths and a lie with each of our panelists, and they're going to tell us some kind of mystery, thriller themed truths and one lie, and then we as an audience have to guess which is which. So get ready for that. And then we're going to do some questions. So I will ask them some questions and then towards the end open it up to the audience. So why don't we get started? On the end here we have Miciah Gault. Miciah is the author of the novel Good Night, Stranger, which was a finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award and the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize. Miciah's fiction and essays have appeared in the New York Times Modern Love column, Poets and Writers, Tin House, Lit Hub, the Harvard Review, The Sun, the Southern Review, Agni, and other journals. Miciah is on faculty at the MFA in writing program at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and she coordinates the Vermont Book Award. And here we have Margot Harrison. Margot is the associate editor of Vermont Alt Weekly 7 Days, where she reviews books and film. Her first YA novel, The Killer in Me, was an Indies Introduced pick and a finalist for the Vermont Book Award. She's also the author of The Glare and Junior Library Guild selection, We Made It All Up. Here we have Sarah Stewart Taylor. Sarah is the author of the Sweeney St. George series and the Maggie Darcy series. She grew up on Long Island and was educated at Middlebury College in Vermont and Trinity College, Dublin, where she studied Irish literature. She has worked as a journalist and writing teacher and now lives with her family on a farm in Vermont where they raise sheep and grow blueberries. And here we have Sarah Strohmeyer. Sarah is the author of 20 novels, including a spoof on Barbie, an Agatha Award-winning mystery series, a fictional account of weight loss that became the Lifetime movie Lying to Be Perfect, and several books for young adults. Of her 2021 suspense novel, Do I Know You?, New York Times critic Sarah Wyman raved, "It kept me reading near breathless until all assumptions were gloriously upended." Her next novel, a suspenseful take on home renovation shows we love to entertain, will be published by HarperCollins in April 2023. In her day job, Sarah is the elected town clerk of Middlesex, Vermont, where she lives with her husband and cat. Her 2 adult children live 4,000 miles away in opposite directions, and she's sure that's no reflection on her parenting. So we're gonna dive into the two truths and a lie and just get to know our panelists a little bit more. So we're gonna start with Miciah.
Okay, hi everybody, can you hear me? Okay, so we were asked to think of the scariest, scary stories to tell you for two truths and a lie. So I thought, what's the scariest thing I can share about me? Number one, I was in a hot air balloon crash. It was terrifying. It happened when I was in my early 20s. Also, strangely, a little romantic, even through the terror, because I was with a boyfriend and we were sort of visiting his parents for the first time, and we went up in the hot air balloon to, just have an adventure while we were there. And it did crash. It was pretty scary. Yeah, everyone survived.
A little bit or so.
It was fine.
They're having
A little louder? Yeah, okay. That's number one, hot air balloon crash. Number two, well, I didn't grow up in Vermont, but I was born in Vermont and lived in Vermont just for my first few years. And during that time, something happened to me. When I was just a toddler, I wandered away from home, just out in my backyard, while my mother had her back turned just for a minute. I only have sort of little glimpses of memory of this, and and some people think this is more of a hallucination than truth, but I wandered away. I was alone. There was a creek sort of back through a little strip of woods in our backyard, and I was heading towards it. I swear to God, a bear came and sat in my path and wouldn't let me cross, and sat there until, my mother found me, basically kept me from drowning, is how I like to think of it. Wow. I remember it. I remember seeing this. So believe that if you will, but since then I have been obsessed with stories of children kind of encountering animals in this way. And I'm working something like that into my next novel. Okay, number 3. I used to share my office with a ghost. I work at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and for years I had the office that was at the base of one of the towers of our old, sort of beautiful administrative building on campus. A ghost was also there, and she made herself known. She has a sort of basis in history. Her name was Anna. She was part of a love triangle that turned fatal, over 100 years ago. And she haunts the building, and her hangout was in my office. She would sometimes turn the music up and down, lower and raise the music. I used to bring my baby to work after he was first born, and I had a swing, one of those that had lights and music, and sometimes I would come in on Monday morning, and the swing would be going, the music would be playing, the lights would be flashing, because Anna had turned it on. Those are my 3 stories for you today.
Okay, so we have hot air balloon crash, bear encounter, or ghost. 2 of them are true, 1 of them is a lie. But I don't know if we can really trust mystery and thriller writers, so we'll see how this goes. So who guesses that hot air balloon crash is a lie? Okay, who guesses bear is a lie? And who thinks ghost is a lie?
We all believe in ghosts. We're like, oh yeah, there's ghosts in my office too.
All right, Miciah, which one is it?
The bear is a lie. I really wasn't a hot air balloon crash. But I am obsessed with it.
I feel like this is going to feel like you guys writing books, like well on stage a little bit. Okay, Margot, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, mine are going to be a little bit less detailed. But for my first book was loosely based on the case of a serial killer who struck very close to where I live and actually killed 2 people. That's my first story. My second story, researching this book, my third book, I stayed at a haunted inn in Montana, and I don't know if I would say I met a bear, but I definitely saw a bear. I was close to a bear. And my third story, I recently appeared on TikTok dressed up like the heroine of the horror movie Pearl.
Okay, so we have serial killer, another bear story, which I'm wondering if it's going to be a common theme in Vermont. And then 3 is the TikTok. So who thinks serial killer is a lie? Okay, who thinks bear is a lie? And who thinks TikTok is a lie?
Well, I can only choose one, right?
The bear one is a lie. I've never even been to Montana.
I like how the theme is now lying about bears. Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
All right. So my first one is that once while hiking on a cliff in Ireland, I looked down and saw a body in the water.
Gee, sounds like a book I
And
read.
yeah, I do have a book that has a similar, so you read into that what you want. My second one is that one time my husband and I were slaughtering chickens. We were slaughtering our chickens, and we had a lot of stuff that you have to deal with when you're done slaughtering chickens. And we went on sort of a back road on the road that we live on. And we were digging a hole, and it was at dusk, like we'd been working all day, and it was sort of at dusk. And one of our neighbors came by, and it was like getting dark, and he saw us digging a hole, and he just looked at us, and he didn't say anything. And the next time we saw him, I felt like I had to explain because it seemed a little suspicious. And he just looked at me and said, "You don't need to explain. I'll never ask any questions." And my third one is that when I was in 3rd grade, our class guinea pig disappeared. And by interrogating all of the members of my class, I managed to figure out where it had gone.
Okay, so we have body in water, slaughtering chickens, or young detective. Who thinks that body in water is a lie? Okay, slaughtering chickens? Okay, and the last one, young detective. Sarah?
So young detective is a lie.
You really did something.
But I have to amend the body in the water story to tell you that it was a mannequin and some kids were playing a trick on all of the hikers. It was like a Sunday afternoon. There were all these people hiking on Howth Head near Dublin, and these kids really did a number on a lot of those Sunday hikers.
Exciting. Okay, Sarah.
This is the other Sarah. Hi. So the first story is of two killers in Trenton State Prison tied together sheets and escaped in 1985, threw them over the edge and disappeared into the city of Trenton. And the first person they called was me. Second story, I was driving through a cemetery late at night in Melville, Long Island, when a corpse flew into my window. That's the second story. Third story is I was once set up on a blind date with Jim McGreevey, the former New Jersey governor who was later disgraced. And at the end of the blind date, he asked if I would marry him. So those are the three.
These are all wild.
And the last one is strangely scary.
Okay, so we have Prison Break.
Prison Break.
We have run me a second.
Corpse going through the window at the cemetery.
I don't know how corpse going through the window. And then we have Blind Date from Hell.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. That's like half the.
Okay, so who thinks is the first one? Prison Break. Okay, who thinks it's second? Corpse. And who thinks it's Blind Date? Okay.
So the only part of the blind date story that's wrong is that after Jim introduced me to everyone at the fundraiser that I was his longstanding girlfriend and we had known each other all of like 1 hour, I said, yeah, I got out of there. He would have asked me to marry him because he would have asked anybody to marry him. But that's the only part of that story that's a lie. The rest are actually both true.
Awesome. Exciting. Well, thank you. I feel like we all just learned a lot about all of them.
And I also had a ghost story, but I didn't feel like I could use it. So, yeah. Because I had just interviewed them about how they had AIDS, and then the New Jersey State Correction System was saying that no one got AIDS in New Jersey's prisons. There was no sex or drugs going on at all. So they escaped, and the first thing they needed was medication. So they called me. I just interviewed them and said if they asked if I knew how I could get the medication. Wow. That was a delightful call. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to dive into some questions for our panelists. I'm going to ask them some first and then open it up to the audience for questions after a little bit. So before we actually really dive into each of your work kind of specifically, I'm wondering if we can just sort of define the difference between thriller and mystery and which kind of writer you consider yourself. So I'm wondering how you personally define that difference as an author and then where you sort of fall on that spectrum. And we can start with Miciah and go down the row.
Okay, I'm not a good one to start with because my book is a thriller, but it was a total accident. I did not mean to write a thriller, and I don't quite know how I did it. So I'm gonna defer to the others here for this question.
Okay, we'll start with Margot, and then we'll come back to you at the end, Miciah, see if you have a thought there.
Now, I may not be a good person to ask either because in young adult fiction, we kind of just call everything a thriller, like Karen McManus, the best-selling author, thriller. We don't talk about young adult mystery a lot unless we're going back to Nancy Drew. But I did recently do a chat with another YA thriller author, and Ellie Marney, and she had a good distinction. She said that in her opinion, a mystery has a proactive protagonist who is solving the mystery and is sort of like taking all the important actions in the story. And a thriller has a more reactive protagonist. And often a thriller will also have the point of view of the antagonist, the killer. So you kind of get more of a sense that things are out of the protagonist's hands. The protagonist has some agency, but not as much as in a mystery. And I would add that a psychological thriller often has an unreliable narrator, and the protagonist might be at the mercy of their own, sort of like not remembering things, not understanding things about themselves.
Yeah, I like the proactive, reactive split. I think that there's definitely something in that. The way that I always think about it is that the sort of the animating question of a mystery novel, whether that's a detective novel or a cozy mystery novel or a sort of police procedural novel like the ones that I write, the animating question is who done it, right? The identity of the killer or the criminal is unknown, and the main character's goal is to figure out who done it. In a thriller, the animating question is more often how is the person who did it, who is often known right from the beginning of the novel, going to be unmasked? How is the solution going to be revealed? And it really, that's an oversimplification, but I find in writing and in reading that really does sort of help to think about, what is the question that is driving the action of the novel. So I don't know. What would you say about that, Sarah?
Well, first of all, I'm really impressed by your answer in an animating question, because I don't even know what an animated question is. I'm going to go back and look it up. I've had these discussions with other authors who are much more intelligent than I am, and the short answer is I think that in a thriller, the reader is going to know more than the protagonists who are in the novel. So, like in Sarah's book, we don't know more than her character. Than is it Darcy, Marcy, Darcy, Maggie Darcy. Right. And in Miciah's novel, what I really like is there's an ominous sense, and I think an ominous sense pervades both mysteries and not all mysteries, but definitely thrillers. So maybe that's why and I gotta tell you, I'm in the middle of Goodnight Stranger now. It's excellent. So there is this kind of, I think there's a sense of foreboding and doom at some point.
Mm-hmm. So what would you all say personally brought you to this genre? Like, what speaks to you about it, and what is it that kind of keeps you compelled?
That's interesting.
Why don't we start with Sarah in the middle, and then we'll go this way.
Okay. So I was one of those kids who loved reading everything as a kid, but I really loved reading mysteries. I always did. I read Nancy Drew's, I read Agatha Christie's. I discovered sort of the golden age detective novelists at a very impressionable age. I think I started reading Dorothy L. Sayers when I was like 12 or 13, and just, P.D. James, and she's not exactly golden age, but I just loved reading them. And then when I was in college and graduate school, I think I internalized something that we've probably all experienced, this sense that that novels that have to do with crime and detection somehow aren't real literature. And so I definitely went through a period where I was, I think I sort of turned away from crime fiction because I had internalized that message that I should be writing and reading more serious kinds of things. And the truth was that I always read everything, and I knew what probably most of you know because you're here, which is that crime fiction is some of the best writing that is happening anywhere is happening in our genre. And there are crime novelists who I would put up against anyone, and I think they would do very well. But the thing that for me that is really compelling about writing in this genre is that I feel like a criminal investigation or the aftermath of a crime, even if it's a thriller where there isn't an official investigation happening, it's it's a really, really powerful way to explore character and to reveal character. The extreme events of the kinds of novels that we write, I always think of it as sort of like the pressure that reveals a diamond, right? That it's just like this incredible pressure. And when you put characters under that pressure, you reveal, it's such a satisfying way to reveal character and to explore character. And I think for me, that's kind of the main reason. I love to torture my characters and put them in really difficult situations.
I'm not so much, I think I approach things more from the horror side than from the mystery side, because I kind of started out as a horror fan, reading Lois Duncan as a kid. She sort of writes horror thrillers. They often have supernatural elements. And for me, that comes out of basically being a very anxious person. And I was always terrified of scary stories. But at the same time, once I got over the fear and actually experienced the story, I felt better. It was a kind of catharsis. I think there are two types of people: the ones who feel worse after they experience a scary story and the ones who feel better. And I'm definitely one of the ones who feels better. So I always gravitated toward those sorts of stories, but I spent a lot of time trying to write sort of more literary stuff, more science fiction, because I always would get these incredibly high concept ideas and want to turn them into books. But I found that the thriller structure was a good way to make those weird ideas a little bit more marketable. So that's kind of why I latched onto it, I think. And I started out writing more on the horror side, writing about a serial killer. And my second book sort of has science fiction, supernatural type elements in it. It's about a deadly video game. But eventually I did kind of come over more to mystery, and that had a lot to do with reading Tana French, an author born in Burlington, but sadly no longer here, because she writes amazing procedural mysteries that are also, I think, kind of psychological thrillers. And they have narrators who are so unreliable, have so many problems, they go so deep into character work. And that, as with Sarah, that always really appealed to me. I always want an excuse to explore all the dark corners of my characters' minds.
Sarah, do you have a thought? And then we'll go to Miciah.
Okay. I think this all goes back to junior year in high school, the day that 3 Mile Island blew in Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And my mother came to pick me up at school that day because a girl I knew had been stabbed 40 times, living about a mile from my house. And that murder has never been solved, and it's kind of haunted me to this day. I actually used it in the beginning of Bubbles Unbound. It was the theme. So it's weird how things like that in high school can still haunt you. Even after drifting off into women's fiction, I came back for 2 reasons. One is so much cool stuff was happening in the thriller community. I think Gone Girl was the game changer. And we all now had a whole different way of looking at narrators, protagonists, who was telling us what story. That was great. Right now, I'm inspired by everybody who I can just think of, Jess Lowry and Kat Rosenfield, all these people who are writing really cool stuff that makes me just want to try harder in the next book to kind of either trick the reader, bring the reader in, keep people interested, give a new twist. And so, at the age of 60, which I am now, it's more like, can I get this game down? And I know that is a weird motivation, but, it started with Holly Brannigan and ended with that.
Interesting. Miciah?
So the thing about me is that I just love a really good premise. I can picture the sort of the first scene that will make me wonder, that I'm very comfortable with. So for my book, I have I pictured, grown-up siblings. Another sibling had died in infancy, and they'd been really haunted by that loss all their lives. And the first thing I saw was somebody kind of coming to their door, standing across the threshold, and one of the siblings saying, "It's him, like he's come back." And then I had to, that created a big question for me, and then I had to figure out how to write a book around it. Parking today, I was parking in the parking garage. I'd drive in, there's a spot right there immediately. I'm like, when does this ever happen that you find a spot? So I pull in, then I get my phone out to take a picture of like the number. Otherwise I'll get lost and not be able to find my car again, you know? So I'm taking a picture of it, and I realized there's like little googly eyes have been put up on that number. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And then I was like, what if somebody has like marked this spot and that's what the googly eyes mean, and by parking here I'm gonna somehow be involved in some like terrible, it's just gonna be a big misunderstanding, you know? I mean, but that's always how my mind works. I like the questions, and in fact I have very firm beliefs about about fiction being how fiction works in terms of questions and answers. Answering all the questions is actually a thing that doesn't come naturally to me, and sometimes I resist. So, you know, when I think about like the Maggie Darcy, you know, the like choreography between raising questions, raising new questions, answering them. I mean, it's this like brilliant sort of pattern that must happen in your book. That is not a thing that is comfortable for me. It's just interesting, you know? So I think I've written a thriller because I've raised questions, you know what I mean, that are thriller-like. And then sort of learning how to answer them is the challenge.
Interesting. So this is full disclosure, I teach at Montclair State in New Jersey. I told my students I was coming to moderate this panel, and one of the students raised their hand and was like, you have to ask them this question. And every kid in the class was like, yes, we have to know the answer to this. So I'm asking you guys this question. I thought I had to shout them out, which is, do you think it's necessary to always include a twist? And how do you make sure that the reader doesn't know exactly where the story is going at the beginning?
That sounds like a whole course.
So I wonder if you can just speak a little bit to that. Do you know where you're headed in the book? What is that experience like for you? How necessary is that twist in a thriller and a mystery? You know, how does that kind of writing process work out for you all? Do you want to start with you, Sarah?
Sure. One twist. No, you can't have just one twist. There have got to be multiple twists. What I've noticed recently in some two books that I've read, one which is really good that I'm reading right now called On a Quiet Street, and then the other one I'm trying to think of what was Jennifer Hillier, is that it starts off with some sort of crime, some sort of awful thing, often involving a child. A child is snatched, a child's killed, something's going to get you right from the beginning. And the next thing you know is that this character, the mother, let's say, is off doing something else completely. And part of it you think, wait, how can this be? This is a life-stopping event. And so there's almost like a twist at the beginning now. And then the really good authors, and they all do this, they bring it right back to that first question. So by the time you're all the way down, skipping down the lane on this other issue or this other situation that this protagonist has gotten herself into, you almost forget about the life-changing event that happens at the very beginning. And now you come back to the end. So it's like that's the new hip thing now. Is the major crime that has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the novel, and then bring it right back. So, did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Miciah, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. I mean, I'll talk about this idea of how to make sure that readers don't know the answer early on. And the way I did that was by also not knowing the answer early on. And in fact, I had gotten pretty far in the revision process of this book. And I was like, I'm really stumped because this stranger has shown up. They believe it's like this sort of magical,
Wait, don't ruin it for me.
I won't ruin it for you. They believe that this is, this sort of magical like reincarnation of their lost sibling. Is he? I was like, I don't know. I mean, I was stumped. A writing friend was like, you know what, I bet you do kind of know the answer to that, and you've left clues for yourself in the book. So let me read it. I'm going to find the clue where you leave, that sort of trail of breadcrumbs to answer it. And she read it, and then she did it. She was like, here you go. This is what you left. Like, here are the clues you left. That's your answer. I was like,
I just want to say,
God.
her number.
No, but just to build on that is your subconscious working. And this is the most amazing thing about writing is that, and I am a revisionist. I just finally got the okay done on a book that I was complaining to Sarah about in April that I had, like, why has my editor give me the okay? I've been writing this book since January. I mean, it was due January. So anyway, But what I'm most amazed by is that subconscious is incredible. Yeah. It is incredible. And in my real life, my other life, I've often learned to just ask my subconscious something because I so trust my subconscious. So if you have a problem, you can't figure it out, before you go to bed or on Tuesday, say, fix this. And then bizarrely, you're doing the dishes on Friday night and you go, oh yeah, right. It's the same is true in writing. And weirdly, I wonder if this happens in other genres as well, but it seems like in thriller or mystery writing, it's like, oh, that's why she put that cup of coffee down there,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Isn't it bizarre?
Yeah.
So that's all right. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no. Do you want to continue, Miciah?
Oh yeah, the subconscious is definitely very powerful. I mean, I try to force it now. I used to be what we call a pantser, somebody who flies by the seat of their pants as a writer, who doesn't plan anything. But I had some experiences where that didn't work out so well for me, and my editor was like, "You need a 3-act structure. You need to plan everything. You need to have index cards." So I got the index cards and I started planning everything. And now I try to know my twists pretty far in advance, but I feel like the twists need to feel organic. They need not to be forced. They need to come from the characters, and that's why the writer's unconscious and sort of that knowledge of the characters is so important. But I've found that, there are certain methods that you can use to sort of get people off the track so they don't guess the twist. You can use a lot of misdirection. You can use red herrings. You can just throw a lot of information at people, which I find happens in a lot of mysteries. There has to be a lot of information to sort through. But no matter what you do, some people are always going to guess the twist ahead of time. And it seems to be a really subjective thing. I mean, just looking at things that people said, like my book, What We Made It All Up, had an Instagram tour. And there were some people who were saying, oh, wow, I was so surprised by the ending of this. And there were other people who were saying, I guessed this about 10% of the way through. So you just can't guarantee, because people are all different and they process stories differently.
I also think people lie.
I will add slightly onto that. I'm in a writing group with Margot, so I read some of her early work, and I'm always dying to know the ending, and she will never tell me. And so I think she's very good at hiding her twists. Sarah, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I really agree with Margot that the twists have to feel organic. I think, I have this little bit of a feeling that in the thriller world right now, there's been this sort of like escalation of twists. And if you read a lot of books in that genre, it's like every author feels like they have to one-up the person who came before them. And it's, in some cases, and I will not name who I'm talking about, but it's begun to feel a bit, not you. It's begun to feel, really, to me anyway, really like twists for twist's sake, and they don't feel like they're an organic part of the plot and of the character development that author's been doing. And so for me, it's not thinking so much about twists as it is thinking about how, when I'm thinking about characters, I always think about how, when you meet somebody for the first time. Lately, college has been a lot on my mind because I have a high school senior, and we're thinking about college and where he might want to go. And when you arrive at college, or you arrive at a new job, or you move into a new apartment, and you start meeting people, and often your first impression of someone is like, there may be a kernel of truth, but you may also be completely wrong about them, right? You may not really understand who that person is at all. And when I'm developing characters and thinking about the roads my plots can take, I always try to think about those character elements where it's not so much that it's a twist or that I'm pulling the rug out from under you. It's that there is an aspect of that person that has been heretofore hidden. And we don't know why. We don't know why that aspect has been hidden. It may be that we haven't asked the right questions. It may be they're actively trying to hide it. And so to me, that's where the most organic twists come from, is that sort of, uncovering of the layers of your character.
And that's I think that's pretty fulfilling for the reader.
Yes, definitely.
Great. So I want to open it up to all of you. If any of you have questions for our panelists, then we will take them now. Does anyone have a question?
No, come on.
Must be some questions.
Why don't we start here?
Well, as some of you know, I write historical fictions.
Yeah.
And I'm just amazed at I've read all of you except Miciah. I haven't read your book. How you put this plot together. I mean, for me, it sort of develops and a more answer, like Margot said, but you can't really do that with this kind of fiction. You have to know the plot, and there are all these ins and outs and backs and forths, and it's so complicated. It's just, I'm in awe.
Well, Lisa Jewell, who's extremely popular, she does not outline, and I don't know how she does that. Lisa Jewell, she's British. The Family Upstairs, she writes. She's great, and some of her stuff is really intricate. I'm surprised she just doesn't plot. She doesn't outline. I don't know how you do that.
So maybe we can use this as a way to ask you guys a little bit about your writing process generally. So what is your specific process? How do you approach a new novel? Why don't we start with Miciah again?
Okay, so yeah, and so you're asking specifically about sort of how do you outline? How do you know everything ahead of time? How do you do it? If you do, like, must you outline? And I love this sort of like pantsers going by the seat of your pants versus plotters, like you were talking about, Margot. And honestly, I think that most writers I know do this third thing. That's this mix of both, right? They have a sort of starting point. Maybe they see the ending. They write a draft towards that, but at some point they get far enough into the manuscript, or they lose their way in the manuscript, and then they take a step back and try to do maybe an outline, or at least apply a structure on top of
50,000 words.
what they've done. Then they keep going with what they've got. Then they have to stop again. The process isn't really one or the other. For most writers I know, it's recursive. It's sort of you go, then you try to apply your structure, but then you just go, then you say, wait, I need to check my structure, etc. Which is also how I work.
Yeah, that is generally how I work as well. I think what I usually do is I get an idea that is irresistible, and then I try to sort of write 20 pages or something like that, just to see if the idea is going to work on the paper, or if I still like it, or if I'm tired of it. And if I enjoy writing that 20 pages and I want to write more, then I will start outlining and try to get a sense of what the shape of the entire story is. I don't necessarily do the like breaking it down with the index cards, but I'll just write out an outline and then try to write that outline. And often the outline ends up changing as I go. I end up adjusting things because I kind of push it a little further in my head. Like the original ending is something that's a little too obvious, and I get a better idea. Something I do that I think is maybe unusual is that I often write in longhand or draft in longhand, because I just find there's less pressure if you're not on the keyboard and you can't erase things. So I will just like write out a scene and then type it in and revise it as I do that.
Yeah, I'm a very similar process that, I love a sort of headlong, quick, rough draft just to kind of get the story out as far as I know it. And I do have a moment, usually it's about 50 pages into the first draft, where I have to take a step back and say, wait a second, I thought I knew what happened. I actually don't know what happens. Let's do some thinking about it. But I really do try to just race through that rough draft, because I find that there's something so magical about writing the end. Like, even if you don't know what you're doing and it's all terrible, just writing the end, like getting yourself to the end of that, whatever that thing that's in your head is so helpful. And, I over the years, I've really tried to outline more. I've really tried to plan ahead better. I've really tried to I've done these things where I said okay, I'm going to take a week for each chapter, and I'm going to try to make it as perfect as I can make it so that I don't have so much revision to do, because I do a ton of revision. And it just never works. It's I have to make those mistakes. I have to write it the wrong way so I can figure out what the right way is. And so I'm just do it the wrong way as quick as you can. Get that out of the way, because you're going to have to do it.
Yeah, I used to have this agent named Heather, and Heather would say to me, "It's just primer on a wall." I mean, Heather had never written anything but memos, so I don't know what she was talking about. But she was absolutely right. You know, it is just like slapping a primer. But I think the thing that happens is as you're writing along, you realize that your characters are not who you thought they were, and then once they start acting and behaving and talking, that they would not have done this or this wasn't them. So I think that's what happens to all of us. And that's our excuse, and we're going to stick with it, right? And tell your editor with the index cards to shove it, you know? Index cards.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question. So yeah, in the back.
Oh, God, no, not that one. That's not a mystery. Right. But thank you. Yeah. Multiple first persons. Yeah.
So just to repeat the question, it is about point of view, and what point of view do you feel most comfortable in, first person, third, and how does that process work for you? Yeah. Why don't we start with you, Sarah?
Okay. Well, Kindred Spirits was written about, it's three women who, as I recall, a friend of theirs dies and their life changes. We'll just do the shorthand. And I wrote that with when my next door neighbor was dying and who was my friend. So it's actually one of my most popular books, but it's one of the books I can't even think about because it just is so painful. But lately what I've been doing is writing first person and third person, and there are a couple advantages to that. One is if you're doing first person in a thriller, that person's going to survive. At least that was the rule. That has now changed. But the third person is always like an unknown. We don't know what's going to happen to that third person, the person, my new book, Erica, and We Love to Entertain. We don't know what's going to happen to poor Erica, but we know what's going to happen to her mother, Kim, because she's writing she's the first person. So that's how I kind of feel about it. It's more fun to write in the first person. The challenge, I think, now is to write into multiple first persons because you've got to change your voice, but it's still going to be I, and that's a very popular thing. Like in this book, On a Quiet Street, that I'm reading right now. Same thing. There's I. What do you have, Miciah, in yours? Is it all first person?
Yeah.
It is all first person. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Miciah, you want to speak to that?
I mean, for me, this was written in first person because I just heard the voice. That is part of my process is I sort of need to hear the voice before I can start writing. And I hear it like it is someone speaking to me and, in my head. I mean, I hear it too when it's third person, but the book I'm just finishing right now is third person, and I wanted that because I just wanted readers to be able to have that distance. I wanted the ability to kind of zoom up, like have the camera kind of pan out a little bit and see a little bit more. I don't know how to explain it except that I wanted a different view for readers, and I wanted them to just be privy. It's pretty close third, the one I'm doing now, but I wanted them to sort of just be privy to slightly more, have a little bit of a less claustrophobic view of things. That's all for me.
Yeah, I write not just in first person, but I often write first person present, which Philip Pullman has real issues with.
I just read that tweet. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, he went on a Twitter tirade against it. He says it forces him to recalibrate his whole sense of time. That's kind of weird to me. I've never had a problem with first person present. I mean, I've never had a problem with third person either, which I've written in, but I've never, not in any of my published books, because in young adult, first person, it's not like, it's popular. I wouldn't say it's dominant because there are a lot of third person books, but it's very popular. Because I think it has that sort of feel of like you're on the internet and you're like reading, you're like hearing someone's confessional video or something. It has that feel of immediacy, which is very popular in YA. So, and I've enjoyed using that. It's kind of like almost a dramatic monologue because when it's in present tense, there's just like the person is right there speaking directly to you, telling you what's happening. So I've enjoyed using that, but I think like I have nothing against third person. I feel like that is more appropriate for certain other kinds of stories. Like Miciah said, it gives you a larger view of things, and you can switch points of view more easily when you do that.
Yeah, I was also dismayed to see Philip Pullman's tweet, or maybe annoyed is the word, because the Maggie books are in first person present as well, and I think I've enjoyed writing them that way. And the first book in the series, The Mountains Wild, was actually it took place in on two timelines, and so the present timeline was first person present, and then the 23 years earlier timeline was in past tense, and that just was a very easy way to signal to the reader that where they were in the story. And then when I hadn't intended it to be a series, when my editor said, "Do you think you can turn this into a series?" I kind of said yes, but I hadn't really thought about the fact that now I was married to first person present, and for the most part, I've enjoyed it. There's something so like immediate, and the voice of that character is just like speaking to you and speaking through you. And for a police investigation, I think it works well because it's like this law enforcement officer gets a case on day one, and it's a race to find who the killer is, right? And so you're in this sort of like headlong, fast. The voice just works for that. But I have to say, I am writing a third person. I'm writing something different right now that's in third person, and it's set a bit in the past. And it's been such a relief in a lot of ways to just like settle into that third person. And I can, my own authorial voice, I can use it without second guessing whether the character would describe something that way or whether, it's been really, it's felt really good, I have to say.
I would love to do that.
So I think we're almost about out of time. I have one very quick last question for each of you, and I figure we can just run through this quickly, which is, do you ever scare yourself with your own writing?
Yeah, mostly how bad it is.
Margot, you want to start? And I will say that this new book of Margot's, We Made It All Up, gave me claustrophobia. I didn't have it before, and now I have it. So, Margot? It's a lot of like wiggling through cave systems. Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, hopefully you won't need to go in a cave, so it'll be okay. But yeah, that might be the only passage that actually scared me as well, because I did go through a cave when I was researching this. And it was really scary. I haven't done it again. I'm not claustrophobic, but I mean, just squeezing through such a tight space, it's really bad. But yeah, usually I try to scare myself, but I have trouble because I just know this story too well, and I know the sausage making that went into it too well.
Yeah. Miciah?
I make myself cry sometimes, but I don't scare myself.
Okay, yeah.
I think the only times that I've really scared myself writing these books, Maggie is the mother of a teenage daughter in these books, and I think the parenting scenes are the only ones where I've really scared myself.
Sarah?
I'm like Miciah. It's not scary, but I do cry. It's ridiculous. What was that Diane Keaton movie where she's sitting there? Do you remember? She's on Long Island. She's writing a book, and she's like,
Romancing the Stone.
Was it something like that? But yeah,
Romancing
that's how I feel. You're alone in this room, and you're up there, and my husband's like, "What the hell's going on?" So yes, mostly that's what I do.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much to our
Thank
panel.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
And to all of you, the audience, thank you so much for coming. This has been really wonderful.